You're listening to Alcoholics Alive, where recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous share their experience on how they live AA as a way of life. None of our participants get paid or speak for AA. Here are your hosts, Shank and Wayne. Welcome to Alcoholics Alive. I almost said Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I guess you could say that too, but we're Alcoholics Alive. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate all the recent comments we've gotten, especially those about the Plain Language Big Book. Keep them coming. We thought we were done with that for a while, but we may bring something back on it. Getting some pretty good questions about it. And comments, concerns. I do know that the second printing is out, where they've corrected some of the mistakes. So don't rush out and buy one. Shank, what are we doing today?
Well, we are on episode 3 of season 9. Where we have been going through the steps. So today our topic is made a decision. Step 3 reads, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And our reading comes from the book Alcoholics Anonymous at page 63. It's the 4th edition, 2001. And it says, we were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. So we have a great guest today, Hugh. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, and very glad to be here. Thank you for having me, and appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thank you for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Hugh. Really, I'm an alcoholic, and my last drink was on January 25th of 2011. It was not a particularly momentous occasion as far as the drinking went, but I was ill, did not know it, and was drinking to try to feel better. Ended up throwing up blood, having a lot of pain, and turns out I had pancreatitis that landed me in the hospital. And I have to go back a little bit because the turning point in my life and in my recovery was on July 28th of 2002. I was a daily drinker from the age of 18 to 39 and was trying to drink myself out. Did my best. And when I came to in a hospital, came home shaking and hallucinating. And the next morning, I don't believe I slept any that night, but the next morning I woke up, and for the first time in as long as I can ever remember, I don't recall ever having a desire to stop drinking during those 20 years. I had a desire for things to be different, but that day I had the strongest desire to not drink again ever. And as soon as I thought that, I heard, you got no say in the matter. It was just as if a doctor had told me, now get your things together because you're done. And that led to me falling on my knees. I had not been someone that was prone to prayer and a whole lot of that, but I fell on my knees, did the please help me prayer. And I did have the Bill Wilson experience, principally that I knew at that point that everything was over and that I was going to make it. And God took me a couple of weeks of prayer to remember to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had been through treatment center once, did all the, lied to the psychiatrists and psychologists and went my first treatment experience. I was about 25 years old and had gotten arrested, and it was suggested I go to this alcoholism treatment place, but none of the people there that worked there were alcoholics. So it had what you can imagine, zero success rate. In fact, I met my college roommate there. That's what I got out of it. Um, you know, and so we drank together, of course. Um, but so I was not an early drinker to speak of. I had my first drink at 14. And I did notice, I mean, I had one beer and felt the effect, and something about being comfortable. And, I met a bunch of my cousins I'd never met before, and I was nervous and shy, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And so, signs of things to come. That night, after everybody went to bed, I snuck into the kitchen, grabbed another one. It took me about 20 minutes to open that pop top, for fear that somebody would hear me. I think I used pillows, and I was to get it, but I had to have that experience again. But throughout the during high school and all that, I would drink at parties, and like other people did, but I would say probably alcoholically, from the start. I don't recall a period in my life where I was a quote normal drinker. It might have happened once, but I don't remember it. And then 18 years old was a difficult year. I had been engaged, broke up with her. The gal I started seeing after that broke up with me. My car stereo was stolen, and then I wrecked my car, totaled it just after canceling the insurance on it. So I believe I got $50 for the scrap, and felt pretty sorry for myself. I worked nights, had access to beer taps, and started drinking every night, and had the pity party that led me to my first completely criminal act. They had a bunch of watches, and this was a amusement park, and they had a bunch of watches, and I took about 15 of them home with me. Had no idea what I was going to do with them. Didn't know anybody like to get rid of them with, but did it, and got caught. Lost the job. I did not have legal consequences, which I should have. Um, but I felt that the guilt and shame from that was such that I could not tell anybody what I had done. So that was the beginning of the lying life. Hit college about 3 weeks later, and went in with scholarship and all that good stuff. Was supposed to be, Mr. Academics. It was within about a month that I was a full-blown daily drinker, couldn't go to classes. And I was in a dorm with a lot of athletes, and they had all the best booze and other varieties of intoxicants. And within about the second month, I was the one they did an intervention on. My nickname at that time was Highball Hugh, and that was very appropriate. And I knew they were right. I mean, I didn't understand why they weren't, but I did know that I had something bad going on. And but the simple story is, from that day until I was 39, I drank every single day that I could. I blacked out all the time. Got arrested when I was about 25 years old, pretty serious. Came out of a friend's house who wasn't home at the time to, had 4 or 5 officers with guns pointed at me, and was looking at some pretty good charges. And that's what got me into a treatment center. As a result of getting probation out of that instead of what I feared, I thought I had just made some poor choices in my life, and that if I paid my bills on time and didn't go out when I drank, that I'd be okay. And so, of course, I went back to drinking pretty quickly, and continued that until the bitter end in 2002. And when I relapsed, I was in graduate school, and I really was trying to figure out what happened, because I was going to meetings, sponsoring. I've done a lot of service work over the years, and was in my mind doing the steps pretty fully, but realized that I had all the warning signs that I let slide, was that I had let my advisor become the most important thing in my life and making him happy instead of my sobriety and the God of my understanding. Um, so that brings me up to today, and it's been a wonderful experience ever since. And I'm joyous, happy, and free. Uh, Try to do with my schedule right now. It's difficult for me to do the service work that I'd like to be doing because I don't have a regular schedule. Um, so I'm going to meetings, and if I hear somebody say they've got 3 days or could be 8 months, and I'll try to I'll talk to them. It's like, you probably don't have good sobriety. I can help you. I don't say that, but I am in search because it's been about a year since I've had people to work with, and I missed that a great deal.
Tell, Thanks for that intro, Hugh. Tell us a little bit about your experience taking step three, like as a newcomer.
Yeah, so I would say I had two experiences with that. My first home group, we had good sponsorship, and it was a group where most people were active, actually walking the walk, and we were pretty tight. Whenever somebody got to step three, we would go up to a little chapel above the church, and they would kneel down with their sponsor, but we'd all circle around and do it with them. Um, my first time doing that, I didn't really have a big experience. And what we read at the beginning is the reason. And then when I met Wayne and we started working together, I think I was about 3 years in at that point, and we went through the book together. I will always remember when we talked about this, and I realized that this was a very serious thing and that I was making a decision to let go, become the one who follows the directions rather than tries to give them all day long. That had a profound experience on me. I am somebody that does not like to hear people say I work steps 1, 2, and 3 every day. I believe you work those once. And I think that step 3 should be taken as fully as step 1. And so that day, I was very, I thought about it before I did it. And when I did did say the prayer and do the step, I felt very different from that day forward. Much more connected, and it's a whole lot easier when you're not the one trying to arrange everything.
Yeah. I'm curious, your first experience when they hauled a bunch of people up to the chapel. So
Yep.
I've never been one that has done that with people.
Mhm.
I've been in other groups. I've been a member of a group where a lot of people did that. I always thought it was a little kind of impersonal and almost culty. What
Yeah,
what was your experience with that?
I believe it was very well intentioned, and it was, the intent was to be supportive of the person who was doing it, but the effect was exactly what you said. I mean, we were all in a circle. It could have been out of a movie. It was culty, and I don't believe it was very effective, to be honest with you. It's not
Right.
something that's a group event, you know.
That's
Uh,
right.
and I sure as heck am not going to do this with my wife if I had one at the time. In the book,
That's that's right.
especially in early sobriety. I don't know how many people have tried that, but
It doesn't
I
seem
don't
like a good
suggest it.
idea, does it? It even
No,
says
no.
you can do your fist step with your wife if you. It just doesn't
Well,
sound like a good
I've
idea.
I sponsored a guy that did his fifth step on about his second day sober with his wife and daughters, and we did a lot of work to repair that damage.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you answered one of our questions because already about how many times do you take step three? Because we do hear in the
Yes,
fellowship a lot or meetings that you take step three every day, and I work it every day. And my experience is I did it one time, and then I
that's
follow that up. It's activated by how I work the rest of the steps.
exactly
Yeah.
that. No, I 100% the same.
So is it just a decision, or is there more to it?
Well, that's a good question. It's a decision, I think, and a commitment. Because even though we only do it once, we're setting ourselves up because obviously it leads directly into the next step because we've got to get into action. But um, you know, I had to remind myself for probably years. Um, I hear people say, I take, I turn over my will and then I take it back. Well, I mean, we're human, but I
That's
believe
right.
turning your will over is, you know, you are giving it over, and we're going to make mistakes, but the commitment to follow through with the rest of the work and the things we do, especially 10, 11, 12, are where it is for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. You hear those people, I turned it over and then I took it back. I
Right.
turned it over and then I took it back. And they think that, that's step three. It's really step 10 and 11.
Exactly.
And a lot of times, I've always thought that a lot of people in meetings when they think they're talking about step three, but they're really describing step 11.
Exactly true.
Yeah. And that's,
Mhm.
what I've always way I've always kind of looked at that. My own experience with it is the very first time I took it, I guess the only time I took it, if you, is I was actually by myself, and I did not say the prayer exactly as it is in the book.
You don't
And
qualify then. You better
I've
get
been
back to
that. Well,
work.
that's what they'll tell you. That's exactly my point. That's what they'll tell you in some groups that, oh man, you didn't do the prayer on your knees with 32 people in a circle in a chapel. Like, no, I did it by myself out in the woods and just made a humble, basically admission of powerlessness and a decision to try to live different, and been sober ever since.
Well,
And
if they ever look at that blue book on page 63, it says that the words are our own, which is just a suggestion. So
that's right. They're quite optional. It even says you can take it by yourself if there's no one
yeah,
there that,
that's
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And that's preferable than someone who would misunderstand.
exactly. Like a wife.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not going, and I am not going to a priest or minister that, especially
No,
if I don't know them.
that's
And
right.
I started sharing some things when I went took my mom to church for her sake, and I've got nothing against it. It's not my road necessarily, but I sat with the priest and shared some things like we would share, and it blew his mind. And so I realized that probably wasn't a good place to share that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think AA serves all the purposes we need. And if you want to go do church, I'm all for it. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement against it. I just have found that the quality of the spirituality and the help in an AA meeting, if it's a healthy AA meeting, is the best I've ever seen anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always been struck by the early members of AA, and when you read some of their stories, and even the way it's written in the book, they they it kind of goes to one of your points earlier. They didn't camp out at step one, two, and three,
Oh no.
right? They made the decisions and they admitted powerlessness, and then they said a prayer, and then they moved on quickly. And they knew that wasn't going to solve all of their problems, that there would be more stuff to do later, but they just kept moving forward, and they didn't camp out there. And
So they
that,
didn't do a step a year, is what you're saying?
no, they didn't do a step a year or a step a month or, yeah. But you hear a lot of that stuff in meetings, they just, they just made an honest, humble admission and a decision, and did the rest of the steps. It was more of a commitment to try to follow this way of life, not to be perfect.
Yeah, it
you
seems
know.
to me they got to work on day one. They did everything they could the first day, and then they got to work, and
Yep.
and we're helping others. And
Immediately helped other people.
right, I mean, they didn't
Yep.
even have the steps at the beginning in full form. So,
Yep.
and it didn't work quite well for them.
Yep. Now, Shank, you probably taken the step in some pretty awful conditions, huh?
You know, I talk a lot about the first time that I really remember like taking this step, but I took the third step while I was in treatment. I was in a 30-day treatment center. That's where I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't remember it being some earth-shattering thing. You know, at that point, I would do anything to get and stay sober. I'd been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I believed that the people in Alcoholics Anonymous had what I had and that they were living lives free. They were free and they were happy and they had problems in their lives. So I know that I took that third step pretty early on. And then I know I did a third step again with the sponsor in the 2 months after that before I went to prison. But the time that I really remember doing a third step was when I was incarcerated. And, you know, there was a girl, I've told this story so many times, but it's true. There was a girl who had some experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't believe that someone else who was incarcerated had any experience in AA. And we did a third step together, and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. It's amazing. Like, everyone said I would be okay, and I am. And you know, it was just this huge deal for me. And then I found out that she had boofed some meth into the jail, and that she had lied to me about her sobriety date. And I just remember being so angry. And once I got, you know, my sponsor, an AA member on the phone, just being like, "Can you believe that?" Like, I would pay the prison for that call just to hear it, because I know I was so angry. And, you know, like, she ruined my third step. I'm trying to stay sober. She's a liar. How dare she? Da 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 da. And, you know, my sponsor at that time just said, "Hey, did you mean it when you said it? Did you mean what you said?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Great, write a fourth step." And, you know, that's how it's gone for me. There was I'm sure, number of years where I was probably someone who was like, I need to turn my will and my life over every day. Like, I can't tell you of a time that I remember being like that, but it does sound like something that I would have done in my first probably 5 years. Just very, you know, dramatic about, I'm turning it over every day, and
What is
I'm
God's
inviting
will?
yeah. And you know what I can tell you today is that I do believe that I honestly took, you know, the third step when I was in that treatment center, you know, my first, I don't know, week or two of being introduced to AA. And I haven't taken it back. I have not taken a drink since then. Around that same time is when I asked for that obsession. You know, I hadn't felt like I wanted to drink, and I can't tell you why that was in a week's time before I was introduced to AA, but I certainly didn't want it to come back. And so I asked God, like, you know, I was told, like, just pray, ask your higher power, you know, that be removed from you. And it has been since that time. Like, I've never thought about a drink. And I don't say that to sound like I'm better than everyone else. It's, you know, maybe it'll come back at some point. I don't know. I just say it that I was at that jumping off place, you know, like, I needed to do something different, and I was willing to do whatever people in Alcoholics Anonymous told me to do. So, yes, I've had some experiences. You know, I've done the hand holding, the praying, you know, there was a period of time I was going to this meeting, and, you know, I had a sponsee, and I was just like, okay, we're going to step outside of the church and we're going to get on our knees next to this chair. And I just remember her thinking, like, okay, or saying like this, okay, you know, she was willing to do that, but people were leaving the meeting, walking out, and they see us kneeling at this chair. And,
Yep.
you know, it was just so
Been there.
dramatic.
On that.
You know, it was so dramatic, and I just, I was like, we're doing this and we're holding hands. And if we need to read it out of the book, then just peek out of one eye, just like silly stuff like that. But even in spite of that, I've stayed sober. And,
Yeah.
I know today, and I make sure to tell people, like, hey, you can say whatever you want. You can say this, hey, the prayers in the book are pretty good. You can say something else, so long as you're talking to your higher power, whatever that may be, and you are asking for help and to turn your thoughts and your actions, your will in your life, that's kind of what I've been told along the way too, for people that don't understand what that means or it seems too big. Your thoughts and actions, and what's most important is next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted.
Well, Shaggy,
Yep.
sounds like you just got to stay one push up ahead of the disease out in the parking lot. You'll be all right.
Well, that's why we were doing the prayer in the parking lot next to a chair, just to show the disease we mean business. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in full disclosure, after you were saying all that, I have done all that. I've prayed with people in Starbucks and behind dumpsters and McDonald's, and I have been in a bunch of group third step prayers, like at retreats and conferences. And you know what? They all can work.
That's the intent behind it.
Yep. They all can work, especially if you follow it up with the rest of the steps.
Well, speaking of that, the first sponsor I had told me to do my fourth step. I didn't have any instructions. We didn't go through the book and do it. He just told me to write it out. And I wrote about 6 or 7 things, which is all I could think of. And, I met with him and he looked at it and he said, well, work on it and come back in a couple of weeks and let's see what you get. And I was just racking my brain, couldn't come up with it. Of course, I had like I said, no direction. But I had heard people say, if you're having trouble with step, go back one. And so I went back to the third step, and all I did was just say, help me with this. And it was just like a movie started playing, and I started writing. And now I still did not do the step in the way that you're supposed to do it. And but that was a big help. Of course, I fired that sponsor. I think I was 3 months sober because I had such a fire to get well that it bothered me that whatever I came up with, whatever ideas I had, he'd say, yeah, that sounds great. And mostly wanted me to just come over and help him with his computer. And fired him felt like breaking up with a girlfriend, but he thanked me later. He had about 13 years in the rooms at the end. I said it. He had been in AA for about 13 years. And after we parted ways, he told me that he realized he had been two-stepping for a number of years and got back. And so it worked well for both of us. And anyways, it's just a side note.
I like that one line. I think it's right after what Shank read earlier, that the third step can be permanent. Right?
Absolutely.
That reading says that. It says, though our decision was vital and crucial, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So if we follow through with the rest of the steps, particularly 4 through 9, right? That's really kind of the evidence if we've turned our will and our life over to God. Or are we doing the rest of those steps?
My experience working with people has been that, they may have some hangups about it, which are understandable, but they're either willing to get to work right away or they typically don't get anywhere. That's one of those points at which I realize whether or not I'm sponsoring somebody that I ought to be.
Mm-hmm. You ever notice all that talk in the big book before the prayer? Right, yeah. It's kind of where it introduces the idea or the concept that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our trouble. And it goes through the analogy of the actor playing a director. I always thought that stuff should be later in the book. I'm not suggesting we rewrite the book for that.
Thank you for that.
But some of that stuff, you don't really know it until after you do your inventory. It's kind of prepping you for that.
Well, I would agree with you. When I was looking over, I noticed that they do ask in that section you're talking about, it says, what is his basic trouble? And then they get to the answers, selfishness, self-centeredness, and that, if we don't get rid of that, it kills it. We can't do it on our own. So we need to help a God to do that for us and with us.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that some of the stage stuff probably can be, because I don't know how many people can relate to being a director on a stage. Few maybe, but the basic concepts. I do think they do a good job in setting up the why it's so important.
For sure.
And that's really to me, that's the heart of it. You could probably boil that down to about one paragraph or two. But Bill did have a flair for using many words.
Yeah, here's a word for you from Bill's story on page 14. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Now listen to this. I must turn in all things to the Father of light, who presides over us all. I think tomorrow night at the home group, Shank, I'm going to say, we've got to turn to the Father of light.
I think you should.
Do it with the lights. And then turn the lights out.
It's a good statement, though.
It's a great statement. I know a lot of people have, I don't know if difficulty is the right word, that they complain about the language that's used in the book. I think the language used in the book is just fine. And the way he says these things drives the point home. And, I know he liked to use different words rather than repeat the same word over and over, which is just good writing. And, all of us, had we had an education in the 50s or earlier, would have been fine with this book. We've changed. The book really hasn't.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we should let the book change us instead of us changing the book.
There you go.
There's an idea that works.
Yeah, some more shrapnel for us there, Shank.
Oh yeah.
Let's move on to shrapnel. You want to?
Absolutely.
Let's move
love
on.
it.
Let's see what we got.
All right. Now we have reached to our segment of Meeting Shrapnel, which is lore, myth, and sayings frequently heard in AA. Our first Meeting Shrapnel is God, grace over drama. What do you think about that, Hugh?
Grace over drama. So that sounds a little more like emotional sobriety or maturity. I said another one. There's shrapnel into shrapnel. Grace over. What'd you say? Grace over
Drama.
Drama. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's idiotic. We've all heard the acronyms good orderly direction, which that one doesn't bother me, but all the rest of them, what the heck does that mean in regards to what we're all about? Grace over drama. That's a result of working the steps and letting God direct me and give me some discipline. And it's not all about me.
It's not.
This sounds like this had to have come from Celebrate Recovery. It sounds like something you'd get on one of their bookmarks. You know where you got that one from?
I think that I heard this in a meeting.
Yeah, grace over drama.
I'm sorry you had to hear that.
I don't. We've covered good orderly direction and gift of desperation and some other ones. What was that one? There was another one that was really weird.
I can't remember.
I'm not in favor of any of them. Why can't it just be God?
There you go.
Why can't it just be Father of Light?
There you go.
Yeah.
Grace
All
over
right.
drama. Huh?
So, Hugh, would you like to keep this one or scrap it?
I would scrap it hard. I have
Gary?
no use for this. I'm out.
I'm scrapping it.
It's out of here. All right, our second meeting shrapnel for today is don't tease the disease. What do you think about that one, Hugh?
It sounds to me like the, if you keep going to the barbershop, one of these days you're going to get a haircut.
That's right.
Don't tease the disease. Again, I don't know why on earth anybody would say something like this other than to feel special. I don't think I've ever heard it at a meeting. I may have, but not that's bad. Tease the disease. I don't even know how you do that. How do you tease the disease?
Oh man!
Go get me some near beer so I can be near beer. I don't know. It's just slogan-y garbage. How about work a step? Get a sponsor. Do some service. Yeah.
Pray. This one, oh my goodness. This hit me just right. I love it.
You're going to use it next time.
I have never heard it before, but it's kind of like the, to me, put the hearse in reverse. It's so dumb.
It's so bad it's good.
I love it. Don't tease the disease. Boy, I can just see people in the clubhouse right now or at the treatment center using this one. Or
it's a question to ask them if they say
meeting.
this. How'd you do that? How do you do that?
Don't tease the disease. Don't hang out in the barbershop too long, Hugh. You'll get a haircut.
That's right. Not
So-
lay down left cut.
Shank, what do you think about this one?
Oh, it's so silly. I mean, this is just like it's like a little rhymey. It's like little don't tease the disease. Like it sounds good if you say it in a meeting, maybe. But no, I hate it.
Oh my goodness.
I also am unclear of what it means. How are we to tease the spiritual disease? That's the only one I'm familiar with personally.
Well, there you go. Don't tease
So
the disease.
we can't joke around with God.
Well, I guess that depends on your. Are you talking about God, grace over drama, or are you talking about?
Right. Well, that one. The one I'm familiar with has a great sense of humor, and so I think he can take a joke. He, she, or it. I often refer to it as the God of my misunderstanding. That's a good thing because I don't try to overanalyze it, but
You're going to keep it or scrap it, Hugh?
Oh, it's gone. It is out of here.
All right.
All right. Oh, whoa. I'm keeping it.
Ah, it's
I
out
love
of
it.
here.
You.
No,
Good
Shank,
for you.
no.
You can have it.
It's out of here. You and I. No.
You can have my share and
Oh.
Shank's share.
Two against
I'm
one.
gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna use it on somebody tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All
I
right.
want to hear it on
Our-
a recording.
Our third meeting shrapnel is if you don't do the work, the only thing that will change is your sobriety date.
Say
Well,
that
maybe.
again.
If you don't do the work, the only thing that will change is your sobriety date.
Wow.
That's heavy.
It is heavy.
Well, it may be true. I think there's a good possibility that may be a true statement. But why? Why do we need all that? Uh, if you're new, somebody should have grabbed hold of you. I think if you really want to get well, this is a statement that doesn't need to be said. And it's kind of sounds like a listen how smart I am.
Yeah.
I don't see it serving any useful purpose, helping others. But I know it would go over well with, a bunch of new people, and you're up there telling them stuff like this. They'd probably think it was pretty profound.
They probably would think it's profound. It kind of reminds me of, what's that one where if you don't do the work, you're going to die, or something like that? Or
If you don't do a fourth, you'll drink a fifth?
yeah, well, that one too.
How about this one? If you come fourth with the fifth on the fourth, you may not come fourth on the fifth. I used to hear that on 4th of July weekend from some old timers.
You got to send that in an email.
I'll type it out. Yeah.
Email that to us, Hugh.
I'm
This one
surprised you
here-
even managed to get through it. But this is go ahead, Jerry.
It's too long. This one's long, and it could well be true, but I don't know if you don't do the work. I mean, you might stay sober and be miserable all your life. I've seen that happen to some people.
I've seen
A lot
that
of
happen to
people,
half
actually.
the people in the meeting,
Yeah.
at least.
That's right. Yeah.
25 years of taking up a chair, drinking coffee, putting your dollar in the basket, and you're the same person that came in.
Yeah. It
Which
doesn't
may
quite
mean
have.
you're not an alcoholic.
That's right. That's right. This doesn't quite have the ring to it that Don't Tease the Disease does.
Right. So it's not catchy. It may not be true, and it's not very useful. So yeah, I like it.
All right. You going to keep it?
No.
All right. I'm scrapping it. Shank, what do
It's
you
out of
think
here.
about it?
I'm not keeping that. It is out of here.
Oh, man.
I don't think it ever had a chance. And I don't know if that one I may have heard. Probably I have. But I don't recall hearing it recently.
Yeah, I've heard versions of it. Well, Hugh, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. I love the show, and it's an honor to do this. It's an honor to do anything for AA program to save my life.
Yep. Yep. And if you're out there listening, join us next week for another great episode on Step 4 with Bentley. In the meantime, turn your will and your life over to the care of God and be free.
Freedom.
Thanks for listening. If you have a comment, suggestion, or just need help, you can email Shank and Wayne at freedom@alcoholicsalive.com. Remember, we're recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but we do not speak for Alcoholics Anonymous, nor do we get paid. Join us next week for another great episode.